What happens when a simple promotional interview turns into a live, on-air debate that neither side expected? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The studio lights are bright, the audience is already buzzing, and the hosts are seated around the table. The energy feels lively, the kind of atmosphere viewers recognize immediately. Today's guest has just been introduced, and applause fills the room as Blake Lively walks out with a smile, waving to the audience. She hugs the hosts, exchanges quick pleasantries, and takes her seat. Sunny Hostin leans forward slightly, microphone in hand, maintaining her calm, professional tone. Sunny, Blake, welcome. We're glad you're here today. Blake, thank you for having me. It's always nice to sit down and actually talk, not just read headlines. There's a small chuckle from the audience. The tone is light at first. Whoopi nods from across the table. We love that energy. The conversation begins with standard questions. Blake's latest project, her creative process, balancing family life with work. She answers thoughtfully, giving credit to her team and emphasizing collaboration. The audience listens closely, reacting warmly to her comments. Sunny transitions gently, but with a journalist's focus. Sunny, you've been very open in the past about how the media frames women in Hollywood. Some people argue that public figures also benefit from media attention, even when it's critical. How do you respond to that? Blake pauses for a moment. She nods, acknowledging the complexity. Blake, I think there's a difference between attention and accuracy. Media attention is part of the job, absolutely. But when narratives are repeated in ways that don't reflect reality, it can shape how people see you in ways that aren't fair. A few audience members clap softly in agreement. Sunny maintains eye contact. But isn't it also true that sometimes public figures push back only when coverage isn't favorable? When it's positive, there's usually no correction. The tone shifts slightly. Not aggressive, but sharper. Blake smiles politely, but her expression tightens just a bit. Blake, I actually try to respond to both. When something is inaccurate, whether positive or negative, it's important to clarify. The goal isn't to control the narrative. It's to make sure it's honest. The audience murmurs approval. Joy Behar leans into the microphone. That's fair. Nobody likes being misrepresented. Sunny interjects gently but firmly. Sunny, but some critics say that when celebrities speak out about media coverage, it can discourage journalists from asking hard questions. Do you think that's a concern? Blake adjusts in her seat, maintaining composure. Blake, hard questions are absolutely welcome. I think there's a difference between hard questions and assumptions presented as facts. When I come here, I expect dialogue. That's why we're talking. There's a noticeable shift in the room. The audience becomes quieter, sensing the conversation becoming more serious. Whoopi gestures calmly. That's what we do here, talk. Sunny nods. And we appreciate that. Let me ask you directly. When you say narratives can be unfair, are you suggesting there's intentional bias or just misinterpretation? The question lands clearly. Blake takes a breath before responding. Her voice remains steady. Blake, I'm not here to accuse anyone of intentional harm. I'm saying that stories can evolve in ways that don't reflect the full picture. And when that happens repeatedly, it shapes perception. That's something I've experienced. The audience reacts with a mix of applause and thoughtful silence. Sunny leans back slightly, considering her words. Sunny, I understand that perspective. But some people watching might say that public figures also benefit from those same narratives when they're favorable. So how do we balance accountability with media responsibility? Blake nods. Blake, accountability goes both ways. I believe in being accountable for my work, my statements, my actions. But I also believe the press has a responsibility to report accurately. Both can exist together. There's applause, louder this time. At the table, the atmosphere feels engaged rather than hostile, but the intensity is rising naturally. Ana Navarro speaks up briefly. It sounds like you're asking for fairness, not favoritism. Blake responds quickly. Exactly. Sunny looks thoughtful, but she continues her line of questioning. Sunny, let me ask something specific. When interviews focus on personal life instead of professional work, do you feel that shifts public perception unfairly? Blake responds without hesitation. Blake, yes. When the focus moves away from what I'm actually there to promote, it can create a different impression. I love discussing my life when it's appropriate, but I also want conversations about the work. The audience applauds again. The conversation begins to feel less like an interview and more like a live discussion. Sunny remains composed. Sunny. Some viewers might say that interviews are shaped by what guests choose to share publicly in advance. So how much responsibility do public figures have in shaping the story themselves? Blake smiles slightly, but there's determination in her tone now. Blake, we absolutely shape our stories through what we share. But once something is published, it becomes part of a larger conversation. I can't control how every detail is interpreted. A brief round of applause breaks out. Whoopi raises her hand gently. Okay, but let's keep this respectful. We're having a real discussion here. Sunny nods. Of course. The tension isn't explosive, but it's real. It feels authentic. The audience can sense two intelligent people with different perspectives, both standing firm. Blake leans slightly forward. Blake, I want to be clear. I respect journalism. I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't. My point is simply that accuracy matters. That's not a criticism. It's a conversation. The audience responds with steady applause. Sunny responds calmly, but with conviction. Sunny. And from the journalist's side, we also believe in asking questions that challenge narratives. Sometimes that means pushing back. Blake nods. Blake, and I'm okay with that. I just want the pushback to be rooted in facts, not assumptions. The room feels focused now. No laughter, just engagement. Joy leans in. This is actually a good debate. The audience claps in agreement. Sunny looks at Blake directly. Sunny, so if I ask you, do you feel misunderstood in the media? Blake pauses, choosing her words carefully. Blake, sometimes yes. But I also think misunderstandings can be corrected through dialogue like this one. The audience applauds warmly. The segment is clearly moving toward a deeper exchange, and the hosts prepare to continue the discussion. The tone remains respectful, but the energy signals that this conversation isn't finished yet. The audience is attentive, waiting for what comes next. And as the cameras continue rolling, it's clear that this is no longer just a routine promotion. It's becoming a moment where perspectives are being tested live on air. The conversation is about to grow even more direct. The discussion continues, and the atmosphere in the studio is steady but focused. The audience has settled into attentive silence, sensing that the conversation has moved beyond surface-level promotion. Sunny adjusts her notes slightly. Sunny, Blake, earlier you mentioned accuracy. Let's talk about how you address corrections. When something circulating online doesn't reflect your experience, what's your usual approach? Blake, it depends on the situation. Sometimes I address it directly if it feels necessary. Other times, I let my work speak for itself. I don't believe every comment requires a response, but I do believe misinformation should be clarified when it becomes persistent. There's a soft clap from the audience. Whoopi nods. That's a balancing act. Sunny continues, maintaining her calm tone. Sunny. But critics argue that silence can sometimes be interpreted as agreement. How do you decide when to stay quiet versus when to speak up? Blake considers this carefully. Blake, that's fair. Silence can be interpreted in many ways. For me, it's about context. If something affects my work or misrepresents a core truth, I'll address it. If it's speculation that doesn't impact anything meaningful, I may choose not to amplify it. The audience reacts with approving murmurs. Anna leans forward. That seems strategic. Blake smiles slightly. It's intentional, yes. Sunny shifts the conversation subtly. Sunny, let's talk about public perception in general. When people see headlines about celebrities, they often form opinions quickly. Do you think social media has intensified that effect? Blake nods immediately. Blake, absolutely. Social media moves fast. A headline can travel before context is understood. That speed can sometimes reduce nuance. A few audience members clap. Sunny responds. But some would argue that celebrities also use social media to directly communicate their version of events. So isn't that also part of shaping perception? Blake doesn't hesitate. Blake, it is. Social media gives people control over their own messaging, which is empowering. But even then, once something is posted, it can be interpreted in ways you didn't intend. Control is never absolute. The audience hums in agreement. Whoopi raises an eyebrow slightly. That's true for all of us. The tone is thoughtful, but Sunny's questions grow slightly more pointed. Sunny, there are viewers who say that when public figures challenge reporting, it can create tension between celebrities and journalists. Do you think that tension is inevitable? Blake responds evenly. Blake, I think tension can happen anytime there's accountability. But tension isn't necessarily negative. It can lead to better conversations. A light round of applause breaks out. Sunny leans in again. Sunny, but what about when criticism feels personal? How do you separate professional critique from personal attack? Blake's expression becomes more serious. Blake, that's important. Professional critique focuses on actions, performances, or statements. Personal attacks target character in ways that aren't related to the work. I try to stay grounded in that distinction. The audience reacts with supportive applause. Joy speaks up briefly. That's a healthy way to look at it. Sunny nods but continues. Sunny, some viewers feel that celebrities are often protected by public relations teams, which can influence how narratives are managed. How involved are you personally in those decisions? Blake answers clearly. Blake, I'm very involved. I don't outsource my voice. I consult with my team, but decisions about communication are ultimately mine. There's noticeable applause again. The exchange feels steady, but it's clear both women are holding their ground respectfully. Sunny shifts slightly in her chair. Sunny, let me ask this directly. Have you ever felt that an interview misrepresented your intentions? Blake takes a brief pause before answering. Blake, there have been moments where quotes were taken out of context or emphasis shifted in ways that changed the meaning. That's frustrating, but it's also part of being in the public eye. The audience reacts with understanding murmurs. Whoopi interjects gently. That happens in all industries, not just entertainment. Blake nods in agreement. Blake, exactly. Sunny maintains eye contact. Sunny, and when that happens, do you reach out privately to correct it, or do you make a public statement? Blake, it depends on the scale. If it's minor, sometimes a private clarification is enough. If it's widespread and influencing perception significantly, a public clarification may be necessary. The audience applauds. At this point, the energy in the room feels deeply engaged, not combative, but intense in a way that comes from meaningful disagreement. Anna speaks carefully. It sounds like both sides value transparency. Sunny agrees. Yes, transparency is key. Blake responds calmly. Blake, transparency and fairness go hand in hand. There's applause again, this time longer. Sunny shifts slightly, preparing to move into a more reflective angle. Sunny, Blake, do you think conversations like this help bridge gaps between media and public figures? Blake smiles genuinely now. Blake, I do. When we sit at the same table and speak directly, assumptions can be replaced with understanding. The audience responds warmly. Whoopi looks out at the crowd. That's why this format works. Sunny concludes this segment with a measured tone. Sunny, well, I appreciate you engaging with these questions directly. It's important for viewers to hear different perspectives. Blake nods. Blake, and I appreciate the opportunity to explain mine. The tension that existed earlier hasn't disappeared, but it has transformed into something constructive. The audience remains attentive, clearly invested in where the conversation will go next. The hosts prepare to transition, but it's evident that this dialogue has moved beyond simple promotion. It has become a live exchange about media, accountability, and perception, unfolding naturally, as it often does on a real talk show. And as the cameras continue rolling, the conversation is set to deepen even further. The conversation resumes after a brief commercial break. The audience is still energized, and there's a sense that people are following every word closely. The hosts return to their positions, and Sunny turns back to Blake with the same steady professionalism. Sunny, Blake, before the break we were talking about transparency. I want to shift slightly. When public discussions become heated online, do you ever feel pressure to respond immediately? Blake nods. Blake, yes, especially when something starts trending. There's a natural instinct to correct things quickly. But I've learned that reacting too fast can sometimes escalate situations unnecessarily. A few audience members clap in agreement. Whoopi leans forward. That's wisdom right there. Sunny continues. Sunny, but critics say that waiting can allow misinformation to spread further. How do you weigh that risk? Blake responds thoughtfully. Blake, I consider impact. If something is spreading in a way that could genuinely affect people's understanding or create harm, I'll address it sooner. If it's noise that will fade, sometimes it's better not to amplify it. The audience murmurs in approval. Joy jumps in briefly. That's actually something a lot of us struggle with. Sunny nods, then transitions. Sunny, let's talk about tone. Some people online feel that when celebrities respond to criticism, it can sometimes feel defensive. How do you ensure your responses stay constructive rather than reactive? Blake smiles slightly. Blake, that's a fair observation. I try to focus on facts and avoid emotion-driven responses. It's important to stay grounded. I don't want to argue for the sake of arguing. The audience applauds softly. Anna speaks up. That's not always easy when you're in the spotlight. Blake agrees immediately. Blake, it's not. But that's part of being in this position. Sunny's tone becomes more analytical again. Sunny, some viewers might interpret your comments today as a critique of media institutions. Is that how you see it? Blake shakes her head gently. Blake, no. I'm not critiquing institutions as a whole. I'm talking about individual experiences and the importance of accuracy. I think journalism plays a critical role in society. The audience reacts positively. Whoopi nods firmly. That's important to say. Sunny leans back slightly, then moves forward again. Sunny, when conversations become public like this, they often get clipped and shared online. Do you worry about how today's discussion might be edited or interpreted? Blake responds calmly. Blake, that's always a possibility. But I trust that people who watch the full conversation will understand the nuance. Applause fills the room. Joy smiles. Nuance is rare these days. There's light laughter from the audience. Sunny returns to her line of questioning, but her tone softens. Sunny, I want to acknowledge something. It's clear you're not avoiding questions. You're engaging directly. That's appreciated. Blake nods appreciatively. Blake, thank you. That's important to me. The energy shifts slightly toward mutual respect. Sunny continues. Sunny, when you think about younger actors or public figures watching this, what message would you give them about handling media attention? Blake takes a moment before answering. Blake, I would tell them to stay authentic. Don't try to control every narrative. Focus on your work, be honest, and choose your moments carefully. And don't be afraid to clarify when something is inaccurate. The audience applauds enthusiastically. Whoopi looks out at the crowd. That's solid advice. Sunny nods. It is. But then Sunny asks one more question, her voice steady but firm. Sunny, Blake, do you feel that today's media environment makes it harder for women in particular to navigate public narratives? The room becomes quieter again. Blake responds carefully. Blake, I think women are often scrutinized in different ways. There's more focus on tone, appearance, and personal life. That's something many women experience, not just in entertainment. Awareness helps change that. The audience responds with strong applause. Anna adds, that's a conversation happening across industries. Blake agrees. Blake, exactly. Sunny leans back slightly, seeming to reflect on the exchange. Sunny, I appreciate this discussion. Even when we don't agree on every nuance, the dialogue matters. Blake smiles. Blake, I agree completely. The audience claps warmly. The tension that existed earlier in the segment hasn't disappeared, but it has evolved. What started as pointed questioning has become a substantive exchange about accountability, perception, and communication. Both women have held their positions without raising their voices or interrupting aggressively, keeping the conversation grounded in a talk show format. Whoopi summarizes the mood. Whoopi, this is how conversations should happen, respectfully, even when there are differences. The audience applauds again. Sunny concludes the segment's direction with one final thought. Sunny, at the end of the day, it sounds like both sides want accuracy and fairness. Blake nods firmly. Blake, absolutely. The applause builds slightly as the segment prepares to transition. The energy in the studio feels steady and reflective. There hasn't been shouting, but there has been intensity, the kind that happens when perspectives are challenged thoughtfully. As the cameras prepare to move toward the next part of the show, the audience remains engaged, clearly invested in how this conversation will conclude and what impact it may have beyond the studio. And the discussion is about to move into its final phase, where the aftermath and broader reaction begin to take shape. The studio has settled into a reflective tone after the exchange. The hosts are smiling, but the conversation still carries weight. The audience seems fully engaged, and you can feel that everyone understands this wasn't just a light promotional segment. Whoopi turns slightly toward the audience. Well, that was a real conversation. Applause follows immediately. Sunny nods, maintaining her composed demeanor. It's important for viewers to see dialogue like this. Disagreement doesn't have to mean disrespect. Blake leans toward the microphone, her expression calm. Blake, I agree. We don't have to see everything the same way to have a productive discussion. More applause fills the room. Joy glances at Blake. You handled the questions directly. That's all anyone can ask. Blake smiles. I appreciate that. The energy now feels lighter than it did earlier, but the intensity of the discussion is still present in the room's memory. The audience begins reacting more freely, some nodding, others whispering to each other in agreement. Whoopi addresses the broader impact. These kinds of conversations can shape how people think, especially when they see two strong voices respectfully exchanging ideas. Sunny adds, and sometimes the audience learns that there's more nuance than what appears in headlines. Blake responds with a small nod. That's really the goal, nuance. The segment transitions into closing remarks. The hosts thank Blake for her time. The applause grows louder as she stands, waving to the audience. There's a warm exchange of hugs and handshakes at the table. As Blake exits the stage, the audience continues clapping. The cameras briefly capture reactions. Some audience members discussing what they just heard, others applauding again as she disappears backstage. After the show airs, clips begin circulating online. Viewers post reactions across social media platforms, debating the exchange. Some praise the directness of the conversation, saying it was refreshing to see an open dialogue without shouting. Others focus on specific moments of the discussion, replaying segments where Sunny's questions became more pointed or where Blake emphasized media accuracy. On social media, hashtags related to the episode begin trending among viewers who watched live. Comments range from support for thoughtful journalism to appreciation for a calm but firm response. Discussion threads form quickly, with people analyzing tone, wording, and body language. Entertainment news outlets summarize the segment, highlighting the respectful but intense exchange. Commentators describe it as a civilized debate rather than a confrontation, noting that both participants maintained professionalism throughout. Behind the scenes, the show's producers reportedly note that episodes with substantive discussions often generate strong engagement. Clips from the segment are shared repeatedly, with viewers encouraging others to watch the full conversation instead of just short excerpts. In the hours following the broadcast, conversations continue online. Viewers express differing opinions, but many acknowledge that the discussion demonstrated how talk shows can host real debate without hostility. By the next day, the episode remains part of trending conversations in entertainment circles. Fans of Blake praise her composure, while supporters of Sunny commend her persistence in asking detailed questions. Importantly, both perspectives are represented in discussions, showing that audiences appreciate depth rather than spectacle. The aftermath reflects the impact of live television. Conversations don't end when the cameras stop rolling. They continue in homes, offices, and online spaces, shaping how viewers interpret media relationships and public dialogue. At the end of the day, the segment stands as an example of how disagreement can unfold respectfully on air, with hosts and guests engaging in real-time conversation, maintaining boundaries, and keeping the discussion grounded in facts and perspective. Now we want to hear from you. Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories. Did you think the conversation was handled fairly? Was it a strong example of live debate? Let us know below, and join us for more authentic talk show coverage right here on the Star Talks.